You're not going to believe what happened on my quiet little ranch. What started as a peaceful life in the countryside turned into a twisted battle I never saw coming. All because of a power-hungry HOA that would stop at nothing to get me off my own land. You'd think a homeowners association is supposed to help the community, right? Oh, not this one. From the moment I refused to let them control how I ran my ranch, they came after me hard. But nothing could have prepared me for the day they took it too far. At first, it was just harassment. Fines for imaginary violations, threats stuffed in my mailbox, even random inspections that felt more like intimidation than anything official. I documented everything, hoping it would stop. But then came the real nightmare when I found out someone had lured a bear onto my property. A bear. Not just a wild animal passing through, but one clearly baited, guided right to my livestock pens and dangerously close to my family. I couldn't believe it. Who would go to those lengths? Who'd risk lives just to win a personal vendetta? Turns out, the answer was right in front of me. And once I started digging, everything unraveled: security footage, phone records, even texts that traced back to members of the HOA board. They weren't just trying to push me out, they were plotting something way bigger. And now, the law is on their heels. Authorities are involved. Arrests have been made, and the charges, let's just say, they're more serious than anyone expected. But how did it get to this point? Why did the HOA want me gone so badly? What was really behind their campaign of fear? Stick around, because the truth is darker than anyone imagined, and it's only just coming to light. The trouble all started when I bought the land. It was an old ranch, tucked just outside the limits of a suburban neighborhood that had slowly crept its way toward the open country. I fixed up the place, got some cattle, a couple horses, and planned to live the quiet life. That's when the HOA stepped in. They claimed their extended jurisdiction included my ranch Evan, though my property clearly sat outside their mapped boundary. I laughed it off at first, thought it was just a misunderstanding. But they kept pushing, sending notices about fencing height, unauthorized livestock, and even how my barn looked too rustic for the area. I didn't back down. I wasn't about to let a group of power-tripping neighbors tell me how to live on land I owned outright. That's when things escalated. One of the board members, a guy named Raymond, started showing up uninvited. He'd park his SUV at the end of my driveway and just sit there, sometimes with binoculars, sometimes pretending to take notes. I confronted him once, asked him what he was doing. He just smiled and said, "We're watching for violations." Then came the strange noises at night. My dogs barking like crazy, fences mysteriously unlatched in the morning, and equipment moved or tampered with. I started to suspect someone was coming onto the property after dark. I set up trail cams, but nothing ever showed clearly, just shadows and movement. It was like they knew where every camera was placed. Then the bear incident happened. That was the breaking point. My neighbor told me he saw a pickup driving along the edge of my pasture the night before, tossing something out, possibly bait. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I knew this wasn't some accident of nature. Someone was orchestrating it, and whoever it was had ties to the HOA board. But why? Why go this far? Why risk everything just to get me out? There had to be more, something bigger, something they didn't want anyone to find out. After the bear incident, I knew I had to dig deeper. This wasn't just about some personal grudge anymore. It felt organized, intentional. I started gathering every letter, every notice, and even pulled local records on the HOA board. That's when I found something odd. A new zoning proposal had been quietly filed just weeks before I bought the ranch. It aimed to reclassify my land for community development, and the signatures pushing it. All 5 members of the HOA board, including Raymond. Suddenly it made sense. My land wasn't just a nuisance to them. It was in the way. I wasn't the only one being targeted either. An older couple a few roads down had also faced pressure to sell. Their fence had been cut multiple times, and they had mysterious code violations pop up even though they lived way outside the HOA's coverage. When I spoke with them, they told me something chilling: they had been offered cash under the table to sell and sign a non-disclosure agreement, but they refused, and not long after, someone slashed their truck tires. No proof, just fear. Meanwhile, my cameras finally caught something. Late one night, a figure in a hooded jacket appeared by the barn, dumping a bag over the fence near the pens. The footage was grainy, but the truck parked nearby matched the model Raymond drove. I took it to the sheriff, and while they didn't act right away, sparked interest, especially when I mentioned the zoning changes. And then, out of nowhere, I got a visit from a local real estate developer. Smooth talker, nice suit, and curious about my land. He said he'd heard I might be open to selling and claimed he represented a group interested in revitalizing the area. But I never said anything about selling. Someone was clearly feeding him information. The pieces were starting to connect, but I still didn't know how deep it all went or how many people were involved. One thing was clear, though: this wasn't over, not even close. Things started spiraling faster than I could keep up. After the visit from the developer, I noticed a black SUV tailing me every time I left the ranch. Not once or twice, every time. I started logging license plates, taking photos, and keeping a journal of every strange thing happening. The pressure was closing in. It wasn't just about intimidation anymore. Felt like someone was trying to scare me into disappearing. But I wasn't going anywhere. Then came the drone. Yeah, a drone. It showed up just before dawn, buzzing low over the pasture, hovering near my windows, and zipping off the second I stepped outside. I chased it once on my ATV, but lost it past the ridge. Still, I managed to get partial footage of it from one of the cameras. The HOA denied any knowledge, of course. But their lawyers started sending me emails, friendly warnings about aggressive behavior, and potential legal consequences if I continued making accusations. I never even mentioned them publicly. So how did they know what I was working on? I was getting close to something. I could feel it. Then, a former HOA employee, someone who used to do part-time clerical work, reached out anonymously. They didn't want to meet in person, but they sent me an envelope. Inside were copies of internal emails and one heavily redacted map. The map showed a new development plan. Roads, housing plots, and right in the center, my ranch. They had already sold the idea to investors. They were just waiting for me to crack. Everything started making sense. The fines, the harassment, the bear, even the drone. It was all part of a bigger plan to force me off the land. But now I had names, documents, and just enough proof to take action. Still, I knew if I made the wrong move, they'd double down. And judging by how far they'd already gone, I wasn't sure how much further they were willing to push. Just when I thought I had everything lined up to expose them, something happened that flipped everything upside down. One of my cameras went dead, just one. The one facing the backfield near the ridge where I had started hiding copies of my evidence, just in case. I raced out there, heart pounding, and sure enough, the small lockbox I had buried was gone. No signs of forced entry, no tracks, just an empty patch of dirt and a deep feeling in my gut that I'd been watched the whole time. They weren't just watching me, they knew where my backups were. That same evening, I got a call from the sheriff's office. But this time, it wasn't about the footage I submitted. They were calling because an anonymous tip had been made about me. They said I had been making threats, setting traps, and that I posed a danger to the neighborhood. It was all lies. But it meant someone inside the system was trying to flip the narrative to make me look unstable, unpredictable. That's when I realized this went higher than just a shady HOA board. someone in law enforcement or local government was likely involved. Maybe not all of them, but enough to stall progress or twist facts. Then came the biggest shock yet. I received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single photo and aerial shot of my ranch hand, a handwritten note that read, "You're not the first. You won't be the last." That's when I started digging into past property owners. Turns out, the previous family sold their land under odd circumstances, suddenly and without explanation. They left town, vanished from public records. No interviews, no complaints, it's just gone. Now the stakes weren't just about me losing land. It felt like I was uncovering a pattern, maybe a cover-up, something far more dangerous than a land dispute. And the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just a fight over property anymore. This was a fight for the truth. And someone out there would do anything to keep it buried. I knew if I waited any longer, they'd bury everything. So I took a chance. I handed over the last batch of evidence, the map, the emails, the drone footage, to a contact in the media. A small-town investigative reporter who'd once exposed a land scandal in the next county. She believed me right away. Said the same names popped up in a few tips she'd been chasing, but never had enough to publish. Together, we pieced the story. She ran it that weekend. Within hours, it exploded. The headline called it what it was: a coordinated land grab wrapped in legal threats and intimidation tactics. It named names: Raymond, the HOA board, the developer, even a retired city planner who'd been quietly cashing checks from shell companies tied to the project. Within 48 hours, law enforcement had no choice but to open a formal investigation. And when the subpoenas hit, everything unraveled. Bank records, backdoor deals, forged signatures. They had built the entire plan on corruption. Raymond was arrested. First, then the rest of the board. The developer skipped town, but not before his own assistant turned over emails proving he'd financed much of the campaign against me, including the drone, the staged violations, even the bait that drew the bear. It was all there, documented. But just when I thought it was finally over, the final twist came. That reporter, my ally through it all, called me late one night. Her voice was shaking. She'd uncovered sealed documents from years back showing that the very land my ranch sits on was originally tied up in a legal trust meant for conservation. Somehow, it had been sold off illegally decades ago. The HOA didn't just want to develop it. They were trying to cover up the original theft before it was exposed. So yeah, the criminals were going down. The story made national news. Now, I'm in a new fight, not just to protect my home, but to return the land to what it was meant to be. The truth finally came out, but the story's not quite finished yet. After everything came to light, the pieces finally started falling into place. The courts ruled in my favor. Not only was I cleared of all the false reports the HOA tried to pin on me, but they were also found guilty of multiple counts, including fraud, conspiracy, and environmental violations. Raymond and 2 others are now facing long prison sentences. And the developer is under federal investigation. The sealed trust documents are being reviewed by the state. And there's now talk of turning the land into a protected heritage site. Funny how the same land they tried so hard to steal might end up more protected than ever. The media coverage brought in support I never expected. People from neighboring towns, former victims of similar HOA corruption, and even some local officials stepped forward to make sure this never happens again. The couple down the road finally felt safe enough to share their story too. And they're now working with me to restore some of the damage that was done to the community. My ranch is still standing. My animals are safe. And for the first time in a long while, I can sleep without wondering who's watching me. But more than that, I've learned that standing your ground, especially when the odds are stacked, isn't just about defending your property. It's about protecting what's right This experience showed me how deep some people will go to chase power and money, and how much damage they're willing to cause along the way. But it also reminded me that truth still has weight, so that even when it takes time, it rises. So if you ever find yourself going up against something bigger, then you'll remember this story. Because sometimes the fight isn't just about land, it's about justice. And justice is worth it.